Good evening. This is the Guilford Board of Education. It is Tuesday, May 27th. We are really excited tonight. I'm really excited, but I think I speak on behalf of my colleagues. We are here tonight to get a presentation from the Technology in Education Advisory Group, or TEAG. This is a group, and I'm sure they'll introduce themselves a little bit too, but this is a group that was formed at the beginning of this year to help Guilford Public Schools start thinking carefully, thoughtfully, rigorously about technology in education. Among those things include cell phone use in schools. We certainly know that across the country, across districts in Connecticut, there are schools taking some pretty active, making some pretty active policy decisions around cell phone use. We also know that our state legislature is pondering a variety of different bills. In addition, we as a board had a presentation, I think a couple months ago, from a really fabulous consultant, starting to get us thinking about AI in schools. And I know the committee touched on this a little bit as well. We had a couple of board members, Mr. Delventura and Ms. Benalosa on this committee, this group, as well as administrators, teachers, students, community members. So just really very excited to have all of you join us. Do you want to say anything, either of you, before we pass this on?
I want to let John and Christina get started, but I just want to say it's been an honor serving on this committee. And it's really, as I said to multiple board members, I think this is one of the best presentations and culmination of data that I've seen as a board member. So really, thank you to both of you. It's been great working with you.
You as well. It's been a journey. And I think that's exactly what our task was to kind of collect as much data from the community to try to give you guys the best picture of what the community sentiment is around how we move forward around cell phones, AI. And then an interesting kind of experience for us was there's another opportunity, which we'll get into, about just general tech strategy in general, because as the world is changing and the different tech features that are out there, particularly with AI, there's a lot of opportunity, so which we're excited about.
And I assume you're both going to introduce yourselves, but I'd like to give you the opportunity to do that, because I would love those folks, particularly who are here in the public who haven't been part of the group or watching us live stream, just have a sense of who you are. That'd be terrific.
I'll go first. So I'm Christina Nickus-Nadler. It's really nice to see all of your faces and to see everyone take time in their busy lives to come and talk about this subject. I'm a mom. I'm a Guilford mom. I have a second grader at Melissa Jones, and I have a 5-year-old who will be getting into kindergarten next year. I got involved. I kind of pushed my way into this, as parents are wont to do, I suppose. Around this time last year, I got really curious about what was going on in terms of technology at my child's school, because my son came home with a Chromebook. And I was like, oh, you have a Chromebook. Where'd you get a Chromebook? And he was like, oh, I checked it out from a library. And I got real curious, because I realized that I didn't know what the policy was at school. I didn't know that he could check out a Chromebook. I didn't know that he was even using a Chromebook. And so I kind of took it upon myself to do a bit of investigating and look at not only the elementary schools, but also the high schools and middle schools, and understand, is there some sort of strategy here, or what's going on? And then I put all my information into a spreadsheet and sent it to Paul or to Dr. Freeman. And you know, I got a phone call from Amity, and she was talking about this group, and I just felt so lucky. I mean, obviously, as someone who takes the time out of my own life to proactively research what's going on at schools with technology, it was an honor to be asked to work on this committee and to co-chair it. And I feel so lucky that we have a community like this that allows us to really have a voice and to sit here and listen to us talk for an hour and go through a 50-page report, because you care and because we care so deeply. And that's why we're all here. So aside from that, I just want to say that I'm also extremely grateful for being introduced to John Foti, who is incredible. And I feel like I have a lifelong friend. And with that, I'll let you introduce yourself.
So I'm John Cody again. Hello. I'm a teacher at the high school. I teach science, predominantly chemistry and biology. This experience for me kind of got presented by Miss Chaff at the high school. She kind of, had asked if I would be willing to kind of take on this opportunity. It kind of worked out in a lot of ways, but currently I'm wrapping up my own coursework to be certified in my 192 certification to be a building administrator. So that was a really nice fit for an opportunity to kind of see things and how they work from behind the pages or behind the screen. And it has lived up to all of my expectations and then some. It really has been really, a breath of fresh air, I guess. But I also knew that this was just who we are as a community in Guilford, where it wasn't something that, one decision was just made and it's like, okay, now everybody just follow what a decision was. It really was this collaborative minded approach to trying to figure out something that we all know is really pressing in our schools with, the pod structure here at the high school is great, but like for the last handful of years, like the conversations around cell phones and more recently AI has become more and more, pressing every day. And they're just kind of like, yep, topic of conversation was again today. And I think that it just highlighted the need for some type of guidance. So I think then as a group, kind of back to we were really tasked with trying to figure out, again, a path forward. And when we had written up the report, kind of in like our opening remarks, it was very much that trying to kind of identify a path forward, but maybe not the only way. I think that we tried to really leave, or not leave, I should say, any stones unturned. We really tried to make sure that all the bases were covered, which again, I think just further gives proof to the fact that we were trying to be as open-minded and collaborative as we could to make sure all voices were. So it really has been an awesome experience with Christina, because I've learned a lot too, because Christina's experience has really shined through with all of the deliverables and everything that has been put forward, because it's been amazing. So great work. Love it. And I agree. With that, we are the Technology and Education Advisory Group. So our first assignment was to kind of conduct research and develop a report. There's two key questions. Do we need updated approaches to cell phones in our school? And the second question was, should there be an updated approach to AI within our school? So that was kind of our big anchoring approach from the jump. And we achieved this by, as we kind of already mentioned, getting everybody that represented a different group in the community, students, administrators, classroom educators, parents, board of education members, to try and figure out what could be a way forward based off of the feedback we have and received. The final report, what you're not going to find, for those of you guys that had an opportunity to take a look at it ahead, we don't really make any specific policy recommendations. We tried to just let the data and what our analyses of the data were and kind of speak for themselves. But what you will find is this community sentiment, insights, relevant research, just to try to give you all the best picture of, again, what our community feels we need and maybe how we can move forward from here. So we're going to share some of those key takeaways, and then kind of here is our team. So Christina and I had an opportunity to introduce ourselves. Dr. Freeman and Dr. Goss, you guys were the ones who kind of led this charge and got it, beginning or started, I should say. And then we had John Montanero from Baldwin, Gary Mullen from Adams, Julie Chapp from the high school. For the parents, we had Jeremy Chen, John Doe Ventura, Shelly, Caitlin, and students Scarlett, Luke, and Caitlin Murray. Some of them are here, so I will turn it over if you guys want to introduce yourself, those that were part of our committee.
Yeah, do you guys want to maybe stand and just introduce yourself? We'd love to hear from you about why you joined the committee or any other details you might want to share.
I'm Scarlett Earls. I'm a junior at the high school, and I'm involved in the community in many different ways, in theater, and I work at Page Hardware. So I was honored when Dr. Goss asked me to join the committee to kind of share my student perspective and represent my peers. And I didn't really know what to expect by being on the committee, but since I've been a part of it, I kind of just wanted to see a policy formed that represents student engagement and supports student engagement in the classroom, and takes into consideration the maturity and needs of high school students, and kind of the use for responsible technology use as a tool in education as well, instead of just a distraction. So yeah, just wanted to share my voice as a student.
Thank you.
I'm Luke Cashman. I'm an 8th grader at Adams Middle School. I was really honored to be asked to join this committee by Dr. Goss. And I think the main reason I wanted to do this was just to try and support like something that could really represent everyone with this policy. It's like, I don't think it's fair to just have one demographic represented with this policy. So I just wanted to try and give a fair picture to everyone. So I do.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shelley Farhadian. I'm an infectious disease doctor and a neuroscientist. I'm the daughter of a high school math teacher, and I'm the mom of 3 kids in the school system. We have a kindergartner, a 2nd grader, and a 5th grader. We moved to Guilford a year and a half ago so that we could send our kids to the schools. That was the only reason we moved here, just from a town close by. And I'm thrilled that we did. School system is even better than we had imagined. Our kids are really soaring, and we feel so lucky that this is such an amazing community to be a part of. I joined this committee, I think like a lot of parents, especially with younger kids, maybe just like a little overwhelmed and assaulted and confused by the tech that's everywhere, and not completely knowing the best way to handle it, but not liking what we're seeing really. And so I was very inspired when I saw the survey. I thought a very smart person put this together, or very smart people put it together, and I wanted to join them to try to find solutions for our kids. So thanks so much for the opportunity.
I'm Caitlin Loomis. I have a daughter at Baldwin, a son at Lakes. I'm a neurologist at Yale and work in our town, and have always been very interested in sort of the neuroscience behind this. So, read books just about sort of developmentally what's happening to our brains, what technology is doing as we're all venturing into this new world together. So similar to Shelley, I feel like we're sort of on the cusp of making decisions, and a lot of parental discussions and dinners turn into talking about topics like this. So I also saw the survey and was really excited to see that people were working on this, and reached out to Christina, and have been really thrilled and honored to be part of the great work that's been going on. And these 2 have done an absolutely incredible job. So thank you all.
I do also just want to really quickly say that, this committee represents a very diverse set of opinions. And for me, that was the most rewarding part of this work, is that we didn't always agree. We had a lot of deliberation, and it really opened my mind and opened my eyes to other perspectives in a way that I don't think I would have been able to get not having this experience. So we just want to thank everyone, because it wasn't always easy. We didn't always agree. And I think that made the work better, ultimately.
100%. So just a quick recap of how we got to here. So we really kicked this off back in 2024 in December, and then we quickly moved in terms of prepping towards a survey, which is really the big bulk of the data that we had gathered from the community. And then following the survey, really in March, which was pretty much our big point of analysis and kind of trying to figure out where we go from here. And when I was last year with you guys and presented at the end of February, we had really just got the results from the survey. They had closed like a week prior, and we had some initial thoughts, and then we were really going to move forward with pressure testing some of those ideas that came from the survey, and then also breaking out into subcommittees to try to just firm up some of the trends that came out of the survey. And a lot of that was focused on our 3 subcommittees were related to research, kind of what is the research out there on these things, cell phones, AI, general technology. What are neighboring schools, districts, even states doing from a legislative standpoint, but also just in terms of district policies to try to navigate this. And then kind of this added bonus, which was this third subcommittee that was created, which I think, to be honest, Christine and I are probably most excited about in a lot of ways at the end, because I think it really provides, again, one path forward for what we could utilize to sharpen and develop technology skills, not just on AI, but on other things related to technology, because as we found out from the survey data, that there really is this disconnect, and there's this opportunity for what we think kids can do, what support they're getting maybe at home, what support are they getting in the classroom, and how can we zero in to tighten that up just to better prepare our kids for life post-graduation.
All right, is it my turn?
I'm kicking it over to you.
Okay, so obviously we delivered a 50-page report, so there's lots of information in there. We're not going to hash everything out in this meeting, but we will surface from our perspective some really interesting and key takeaways. Again, we tried to be super objective in the report data, but this is an interesting way to frame what you're reading and some key points to think about when you're going through the data. So the first thing here is that cell phones take time away from learning. I think the elephant in the room here that we all need to kind of confront is that there are very different experiences in our schools, especially between our educators and our students, in terms of cell phones and the role that they play, and whether or not they're a problem or if they're enhancing the school experience. So we as a committee struggled with this a little bit, right? Because like, what are you going to say? Like, teachers feel that, you know, cell phones are problematic. Students feel that they're not. Who's right? Who's wrong? You know, it's tough to tell someone, it's fine, just don't worry about it. So we wanted to, as a committee, try to find a way to get away from, you know, who's right and who's wrong, and anchor on some sort of baseline, right? Now, this is not an exact science. I'm sure there's more precise ways to go about this, but we looked at our survey and we tried to find some information that could help us formulate some sort of impact estimate, right? And see how different that looks if you're looking at it through the lens of students versus looking at it through the lens of educators. So something that's really great about Guilford schools is that the varying schools have different policy use cases that we can compare and contrast. So Adams, for example, has a formal policy, and they it's off and away, so you can have a phone, but you can't see or hear it. As opposed to Guilford High, which has a more flexible policy, right? It's teacher's choice. So in the classroom, teachers can decide. So for this study, we focused on Guilford High, since it's sort of closer to not having a policy than having a policy. And what we learned is that the divide is pretty large. 94% of educators at GHS versus 21% of students believe that classroom cell phone disruptions are problematic. That continues in terms of frequency, right? In terms of how often cell phones disrupt in the classroom. 70% of educators experience daily plus interruptions versus 5% of students. This is stark, right? When you hear this information, you're just like, oh my God, like this is such differing accounts. How can I as a board act on this, right? It's so widely different. The one thing that students and educators largely agreed on is the amount of time it takes to recover from a cell phone disruption. So 1 to 2 minutes is about the time that both of these groups, the majority of both of these groups agree. It takes for the teacher to notice, redirect the student to comply, and then for everyone to get back to business. Now, there's scientific research about that as well, but this is just based on what our community is saying and what they're reporting to us. So we decided to anchor on this and take these metrics and use them to estimate what the baseline impact might be. So when you look at it from the educator perspective, and you take 70% of educators at GHS, and apply the daily disruption at 1 to 2 minutes, you get about 4 hours per educator of time lost teaching and about 33 minutes per student of time lost learning. This is annual. The thing that is fascinating is that when you apply that same approach to the students, so you take 5% of the total student population and you apply that daily disruption at 1 to 2 minutes, you get a pretty similar outcome. So the estimate there is about 5 hours per educator versus 39 minutes per student. So I thought that this was an interesting tidbit here, because what it shows is that both of these perspectives can be right? Like both of the experiences that students and educators are having can be accurate and the outcome can be similar. So I'll pause here. I see.
I do.
Yeah.
Sorry, would you prefer questions at the end? Because we can definitely wait.
I'm okay if you want to interject with
So
questions.
I'm wondering, because I went through the report and I got stuck on this page. So I'm wondering, I'm still not sure how you landed, and this is not the most important piece, so I'm not asking you to spend hours. But the 70% and 5%, I'm still a little stuck on what you're sharing.
Yeah. So, well, there is also in the report, just to let you know, there is a little link on the bottom of the page that opens up the map. So
Right, which I did, the one thing I haven't done yet. See,
Okay.
so you called me out already. No, that was important. I should have done that.
Extrapolation.
I was like getting through the report first, so,
It's
okay.
an extrapolation.
I'm happy to look at that later and you don't have to describe it now.
Totally fine. It's an exercise, so that's
Okay.
important. It's taking that same metric, since 70% of educators who, for
Right.
example, said in the survey that
Right.
they experienced daily disruptions, and applying it to the total population of educators at GHS
Okay,
to get some sort of baseline. So
Sure.
if 70% of all of the educators are experiencing daily plus disruptions at 1 to 2 minutes each, then you can kind of get to an estimated impact and how much time cell phone disruptions are taking.
absolutely. And then how did that get applied though to students from a teacher perspective?
Well, then you take the amount of time, that total amount of time, and you apply it to all the students at the
Gotcha.
school. Thank you. Absolutely. So I guess, like, again, this is not an exact science. You're not putting this like in your, but what I think what it did was it helped me mentally get over the fact of trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong. That's not really the point. The point is that there's actual time being taken away from learning and from teaching because of cell phones. And that it's actually pretty similar when you look at the account of the student and educator. So they are more aligned than they think, actually. And I wanted to also just take this moment to invite Caitlin up to talk about some of the scientific research around the impact of cell phones, smartphones at schools, and provide a little bit more information about how that impacts the class.
Can I stand here?
Yeah.
Okay. And I do believe in the report there are links to all of this in our references. So everything that I say is discoverable. So I was on the subcommittee, as Christina mentioned, tasked with finding the data relevant to smartphones in the learning environment. The findings that I'm going to discuss are drawn exclusively from peer-reviewed, rigorous academic studies. We excluded anecdotal newspaper editorial sources. And we're going to explore several different categories with multiple studies in each domain. So I'll summarize our findings, and this is just a small snippet of what we sort of unearthed. The first category was smartphones and attention. And we learned that the mere presence of a smartphone increases cognitive load, reduces working memory, attention, performance, and speed. The studies we reviewed showed that just being in the presence of a smartphone has a strong and negative impact on students, whether or not they're actively engaging with the phone. Studies show that smartphone usage correlates with a reduction in students' school ranking and a decrease in their average exam score. The more they use the phone, the lower their scores are. Students with smartphones in classrooms had difficulty retaining material that they heard in class compared to students who did not have smartphones in class. And the students without smartphones wrote down 62% more information, took more detailed notes, were able to recall more detailed information later, and scored a full letter grade and a half higher. Moving to smartphones and notifications. So on a typical day, teenagers with phones received a median of 237 notifications. Of those, about a quarter arrived during the school day and about 5% at night. In school, smartphone distractions occur once every 3 to 4 minutes, lasting over a minute in duration. Notifications alone significantly impacted performance on an attention-demanding task, even without participants interacting with their device. So simply hearing a notification without touching the phone or looking at the phone disrupts performance as much as answering a call or a message. Smartphones outside of the classroom. So banning phones during recess, and these are again all taken from different studies. Banning phones during recess led to a significant increase in physical activity across ages and genders. Removing screens from non-academic time improved preteens' ability to understand nonverbal emotional cues. And meals without phones led to better focus and higher enjoyment in social settings. There are a few very well sort of done and orchestrated and published studies on smartphone bans. So smartphone bans in schools have shown improvement in academic performance and reduction in bullying. Low performing students are most impacted by smartphone bans, offering an opportunity to close the educational gap. Smartphones and safety, and we included this a little bit outside of the classroom, obviously, but it is a common reason that parents cite as a reason why they would like their students to have phones, to be able to contact them in emergency situations. And what we found is that smartphone usage during an emergency distracts students from life-saving instructions. It can serve to propagate rumors and can significantly delay emergency response by increasing parental arrival at the school, increasing traffic and congestion. Advisory recommendations. So in 2023, the Surgeon General issued an advisory on social media and youth mental health, indicating that, quote, while social media may have benefits for some, there are ample indicators that social media can have a profound risk of harm to the mental health and well-being of children and adolescents. The American Academy of end quote. The American Academy of Pediatrics has issued a statement saying that, quote, research is clear that phones are a distraction in school, end quote. They highlight the effect on learning, usage of smartphones for bullying, and difficulty that teachers face when trying to teach. So to summarize our findings, there's robust data analyzing the detrimental effects of smartphones on students in school. Well, much of the data is not a surprise. There were a few findings that I thought were worth highlighting. One, that just the mere presence of a phone and not usage impairs attention and working memory, that hearing a notification without responding to that is as detrimental as engaging with a smartphone. Smartphone bans reduce bullying and offer a low-cost initiative to reduce the educational gap. Both the Surgeon General and American Academy of Pediatrics highlight the profound risk of social media and smartphones on mental health, bullying, and learning. So as we sift through this body of literature, we just hope to highlight the importance of looking both within the classroom and outside of the classroom walls and the playgrounds, in the lunchrooms and the hallways. Social and emotional learning, as well as physical activity, we feel are essential features of an educational program and should be analyzed alongside academic performance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, so moving to the next part of this key takeaway here. I should say, does anyone have questions? Like, if we're for Caitlin or?
Oh, yeah.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Caitlin, was there any information, like we've had a lot of people write saying they'd like cell phones to be locked in the bags?
Yeah.
Did you see anything that talked about if they were in the bag? Did that have any?
So the study about the presence of the cell phone, one of the most compelling ones is that they measured students. The cell phone was on the desk, was in a backpack, and was outside of the room. And the biggest drop was from when it left the room. Basically, there was the most distracting case was when the cell phone was on the table, and they did attention tasks, working memory tasks, all these cognitive tasks. It dropped a little bit when the phone was in the bag and outside. They didn't do it with pouches. And so it's a little bit hard to extrapolate what that would be. I think for sort of from like a neuroscience perspective, the fact that the phone is there is the potential of something happening, right? Like a notification, a text, a call, or something. And I think I think that's kind of what shifts people away from the task at hand. So I'm extrapolating here, but the pouches are, I describe them to my kids, it's like your phone went onto an airplane, because they, they can't get a notification, they can't connect to
Right.
Wi-Fi, nothing can happen. It's like a piece of plastic at that point. So there's no, ooh, maybe my phone's gonna ding. It's like that possibility has sort of been turned off, and the phone is in all likelihood out of sight because they can't do anything with it. So I think I would have to estimate or sort of guess that it's similar to the phone being out of sight, but I didn't see any studies on that. That may be too early.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think I just need to react to the fact, I mean, I've two sons who are now in their early 20s. And I am still kind of floored by the number of notifications per day that you just said out loud.
Yeah,
in
and
a
that came from the American Academy of
24
Pediatrics.
hour period.
Right.
I mean, I've done some research on this myself. I had not heard that. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, the American Academy of Pediatrics put out a really good resource, and that was from data that they had collected, and also just the how far away it takes you from the task at hand. So you see a note, you hear it, or see it, or respond to it, and any of those things are all actually equal, and it just completely shifts your brain to a different whatever else is going on, or you think might be going on the phone. And it takes a very long time to shift back to the teacher and what you were focusing on or doing or writing.
Well, and I find it sometimes in the work environment, when I'm talking to someone and they're down at their watch, and I'm like,
Yeah, it was interesting. The notification had us all thinking, and again, there were not studies exclusively on smart watches. But I do think that the same would have to hold true for when your watch buzzes, and you just are sort of, you don't look at it, but you're like, ooh, is that? What is that? Your mind just sort of wanders a little bit.
I've literally taken mine off and thrown it across. I'm in court and I'm just throwing it at a colleague going, I'm talking and this is annoying me. And
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we didn't really get into, but I think is really fascinating, is this developmental stage of these kids, because their brains are not, I mean, we can't resist it, and our brains are theoretically much more developed, but there's a critical time period for when they develop their impulse control and their executive function and all these things, and it's happening here. And when they're in school, in these years rather. And so I think for them to resist it is just, it's an impossible sort of ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
okay.
Okay, so in terms of the current policies, we did see from community sentiment and feedback that there's room for improvement. So across the board, stakeholders feel that policies could be more effective and could better meet their needs. So less than 17% of any stakeholder group find the current policies effective. And again, that's across the board. And less than half of any stakeholder group report that their needs are fully being met by the current policies. And we get into what the needs are of, or what they said in the survey. We also did notice in comparing Adams and Guilford High, who both schools have very different policies. Adams has a formal often stored policy, and Guilford High has a teacher's choice policy that's informal. We did see a 46% reduction in in-class cell phone use from students at Adams. And that's really interesting because as a committee, we talked a lot about the fact that students over time, as they get older, should be developing impulse control and should be able to, better manage cell phone use during class, but that's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing the younger students who have less time with cell phones showing more restraint during class. Okay, the next key learning that we have here, and I don't think that this is news to anyone, but there's no perfect solution that exists that's going to meet all the needs for every single stakeholder group, and that's the task, the challenging task that you guys have ahead of you. But it's helpful when you really understand what those needs are. So talking about parents, what we saw coming through really strongly in the feedback was very strong signal that the majority of parents support more restrictive policies that enhance well-being and academic focus with consistent application. And there was resounding requests from parents to preserve that access, that direct access to their student in the event of an emergency. This is a real source of anxiety for our parent community, and honestly also for our students. That family link is a really key reason why parents feel that students need cell phones at school, and it really does impact the well-being of students as well. And speaking of students, the strong signals that came through in terms of their need states were that the majority of students strongly oppose being fully separated from their phones. Students also desire fair and consistent application of any policy. So, a lot of students in the open text feedback would talk about how they follow the rules. They're listening to the teacher, and they feel that because other students aren't able to or haven't done so, that they're being penalized for that, and that their more restrictive policies are being put on them, even though they themselves follow the policies. So that was something that came through. Students also really advocate for being able to develop a relationship with technology that prepares them for the real world. So this was both for cell phones, but also specifically for AI, to be able to understand how to utilize that. So when they go out in the real world, they are relevant to the workforce or to the ways that technology are evolving very rapidly over time. Okay, so we have two different groups of educators, and we broke them out because their need states were very different when we were starting to dig into this. So we have classroom educators. These are the teachers that are in the classroom with the students. Classroom educators strongly support more restrictive policies and more consistent policies. And they request clear direction from the district that minimize their burden to enforce, because they are the front lines, right? And honestly, no matter what happens, they will be the front lines. So they just want that to be considered in whatever solution is put in place. And then on the other end, the administration educators, and I don't know if that's the right term, so apologies if I used the wrong term there, but these are also educators, but they may be working to run the school and to set up the frameworks for the classroom educators. Administration educators strongly advocate for keeping as much time and resources as possible supporting student education. We get into this later, but we didn't see a lot of evidence that cell phones are actually an educational need for teachers or students. And I think that administration educators feel this acutely, right? So they are very hesitant to release resources for things that aren't directly related to educating students. There's also a really strong call to action for shared responsibility, because it can feel like when we talk about policies, it automatically goes to the district or to the school administrators to figure out what that is. And so it's not an evenly distributed burden. And it becomes something that feels like, perhaps, again, this is needs, this is feeling, feels like it's all on them. And then administration educators also echoed the same sentiment that the students echoed, which is that they feel this strong need to prepare students for the real world. That if we completely take away this technology in general, or we don't allow them to learn how to use it, then we're not actually doing them a service when they fly off and leave our schools. So again, just kind of reiterating that there's a big difference here in perspective. So 82% and 85% of educators both support district-wide policies, whereas it's flipped for students. 78% of students do not support them. And I do also want to I know that you guys are doing such an amazing job at listening to the community and understanding their needs, but there is also pending state legislation that's happening that I think is important for us to acknowledge, and also for the parent community to acknowledge, that we may not have a choice
Right.
about whether or
Right.
not to develop policies. That may be a mandate that comes down from the states, likely that it will be. And there are, in the report, we talk about the various legislation that's on the table. But there may even be more restrictive policies that come down where it's, however you want to incorporate it is up to the school, but it has to be a bell to bell, for example.
Right.
So this choice may be made for us. And I did also want to note here, this is something that came up in our deliberations, and it's really important because parents and students feel so strongly that the access to a phone in the event of an emergency is a lifeline for them. But there are scientific studies that show that phones can actually be counterproductive in emergency situations. And this is something that can certainly be, amplified for our parent communities. I don't know how many people are aware of that information, and I don't know if you'd like to say anything more about that.
Yeah, it came a little, I mean, when you think about it, I think it becomes, you understand why, but I think it's not necessarily intuitive, and just people that I've been talking to, I think it's come as a surprise to most people, as it did to myself when I came across this. So I do think it's a less well-known, just sort of, piece of research that we can share, because I do think that's a big issue, for the connection that people want.
Yep. Thank you for that. Okay, so one of my favorite activities that we did on the committee, and I don't know if everyone else shares this, but I thought it was so fascinating, was we took all of these need states and we equally weighted them, meaning that nobody's needs are more important than anybody else's needs. And then we looked at all of the potential solutions that you guys might put in place, or that the district might put in place, such as a complete phone ban, a bell-to-bell situation where phones are allowed but can't be seen or heard, classroom turn-in, dumb phones, allowing dumb phones but not allowing smartphones. Several different options, teacher's choice, which is the current option that GHS has in place. And we developed just like a really simple scoring system to keep us objective about whether or not those policies met each one of the needs. And we deliberated on it. And we kind of had like a little bit of a debate about whether or not these things met the needs. And so after coming out of that exercise, the two that sort of rose to the top, not because they met every single need, but because they were the most balanced, was a bell-to-bell or a class turn-in. We did a similar exercise for an operational impact analysis. So this is just nodding to the fact that whatever solution is put in place may have outsized effects on the operations of the school. And so we identified, what those key criteria is, and did a similar scoring system. And bell-to-bell and teacher's choice sort of rose to the top as the least operationally complex.
Next question.
Yeah.
Does bell to bell mean
Thank you.
first thing in the morning to the end
Yep.
of the
I
afternoon?
had the same question.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
Yeah.
not bells per period, but
okay,
start
not
and
like
end.
lunch
No,
or
start-
recess.
A
or-
full day, start to
Yeah.
end of the day, not individual periods.
It's a really good question. I did not think about whether or not it was in between the bells for classes. Thank you for that question. Okay. All right, so something else that was really fascinating coming out of the survey data was that whatever policy is put in place, consistency is almost equally as important, regardless of what the policy is. You can see here that in the need states, it's showing up for parents, for students, and for classroom educators. And it was one of the most requests that we got across all stakeholders in open text feedback. We also saw, we did an interesting exercise where we separated the student survey feedback into two groups. One group was students who experienced consistent enforcement versus students who experienced inconsistent enforcement. And we saw that the students who experienced inconsistent policy enforcement were more likely to say that the policy was ineffective, and their feedback was more cynical or frustrated in terms of their open text about it. So policies don't work. Why are we even doing this? What's the point? That type of thing. Whereas the students who had more consistent enforcement were a little bit more open to the policies and more likely to think that the policies worked. Something else that's really interesting here is looking at some of the trends for our neighboring districts. And I think consistency is a big driver of some of the trends we might be seeing. And I wanted to invite Shelley up to talk about the research that she did.
I'll keep it brief because in the 50-page report, there's a really nice table that summarizes the neighboring districts, but maybe just to synthesize it a little. So our subcommittee was tasked with reviewing cell phone policies in nearby school districts, and we focused on policies that have been implemented across elementary, middle, and high schools in multiple Connecticut districts. And not surprisingly, we found a wide range of approaches, with the majority of districts, particularly at the middle and high school levels, implementing some form of restricted access to student phones. We found that over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of activity with school districts making policies, and that during this time period, several schools have begun to utilize these magnetically sealed pouches that allow students to retain physical possession of their device during the day, while the device contents are inaccessible to them throughout the day. And this was adopted by numerous high schools and middle schools, as I'll tell you. So these include school districts in Manchester, Middletown, New Haven, Torrington, Naugatuck, and Wilton. We saw that New Britain and Stonington are utilizing the pouches for middle school, but not yet for their high schools. 2 nearby districts, Hamden and Madison, are doing bell to bell. So that means that phones have to be stored in lockers or in backpacks during the day, and students are not allowed to access them during that time. And a couple of school districts, including New Canaan, Brookfield, Branford, are still relying on classroom turn-in policies. As Christina alluded to, in our research, we found that many schools started with bell to bell as their policy, and then switched over to school collection or magnetic pouches because of poor compliance. So for example, in Middletown, administrators were reporting that students were frequently circumventing the rules, and even though there was a bell-to-bell policy in place, kids were still checking their phones during the day, and even in class. And so because of that, they switched over to the more restrictive policy, utilizing the pouches. And in general, we think this reflected a broader trend among the districts that we looked at, which is that when less stringent policies fail to curb distractions and misuse, the schools that went on to more enforceable measures. Overall, I don't think we could say it enough tonight. Whatever policy is adopted, it's really clear that without strong buy-in and strong commitment to enforcement, no policy is going to work.
All right. Any questions before we move on? How's everyone doing?
No, this is
Presentation.
terrific.
Okay.
This-
See,
the
I see
report was
everyone kind
terrific. And this is,
Really good.
this is
Great,
terrific.
okay,
No, this is terrific.
great. Time check. Is there a certain amount of time that we have
No
here? Okay,
limits.
great. All right. I will try to.
I mean, I should be careful.
Are you speaking for the whole?
I should be careful. I would prefer you to take the time you need
Yes.
to share the information you
Okay.
have. I expect that I'm gonna ask at the end that as we find ourselves diving into this, if we could call on the committee occasionally, if we have follow-up questions, but please take the time you need to share what you want to share tonight, because I am all ears.
Okay, great. Yes, and I think I speak for everyone when we say that we would be happy to
Terrific.
to follow up in any way needed. So we did see some success enablers come through in some trends in the open text feedback. So you know, one of the key themes that came up was perhaps thinking about, if you decide to put policies in place, some sort of phased approach. Shelley talked about this a little bit in terms of the escalation that's happening with yonder pouches, for example. But understanding that a switchover is going to be a challenge for a period of time for the students, for the faculty, and for everyone involved. And so we did see some requests come through, like this educator who requested a troubleshoot period that doesn't enforce certain changes immediately. Perhaps it's a softer launch and then increases. Don't know if that's the right approach, but something that came through from the community. And a student even who said, I would like it if they work with us on new norms gradually until we learn how to function better under the rules. Another theme that came up was transparency. So the policies are going to roll out, but there's an appetite for an understanding about what the reason behind it. And an example quote here from a parent: don't just roll out a new policy, but highlight the changes to current policies and explaining the thinking behind the changes. And the student who said, I don't have any requests, but I would like them to be explained in depth and the reasoning behind these new policies. So any sort of comms plan, really thinking about certain forums that can really explain the thinking behind what choices you guys are going to make. And then this one was really interesting too. I thought this was a wonderful idea and thing that came through, that having a more coordinated rollout would be really helpful. So this parent said written and webinar comms that are jointly shared with parents and students. So it makes the conversation between parents and kids streamlined and gains alignment. Or this educator who said it would be really beneficial for district administration to be on the same page for this rollout. Perhaps all K through 12 teachers are together and hear the same information at the same time, and then 3 to 5 together, and so forth, depending on what makes sense to the group. Therefore, there wouldn't be such variety across the district buildings and classrooms for the language for expectations. This next section was really, like, I don't know, special to me and to my personal on this committee as a parent, because obviously I had strong opinions, and I have strong opinions about what should happen at schools. But this was probably the biggest gift for me in learning about what the call to action for me as a parent, to help support the management of phones at schools, and some of the information that I found really interesting, and I think maybe we all will. So we asked in the survey, what would be lost without cell phones? We asked students and educators what they would lose if they no longer could have cell phones at schools. And students largely echoed that comfort, that security that they have of having the phone, and the autonomy of being able to own your own phone, decide when you want to use it, and have it as a lifeline in your everyday life. Educators, there was no like big themes that popped up that would show some personal or educational loss from the absence of cell phones. In terms of what would be gained without cell phones, students really saw very minimal personal gains. But educators kind of resoundingly said that they felt that there would be a dramatic improvement in student engagement. So again, I mentioned this earlier, but what this signals to me, and again, this is not conclusive in any way, but what this signals is that there really is no educational reason for phones to be in our schools. That being said, we also asked, parents in the parent survey how old their child was when they first gave them the phone. And this was really interesting to me. 11 years old is the average age in Guilford that students are getting their first phone. And again, this is the average. I have younger kids, so this was a little surprising to me. I don't know what the older kids are doing or what's happening, but that was really, really interesting. And I thought something that parent community should hear. The follow-up question that we asked was, okay, so whenever you gave your kid the phone, do you feel that was the right choice for your family? Do you wish you would have waited? Do you think you should have given it earlier or sooner? 3 out of 4 parents believe that it was the right choice for them to provide the phone to their child when they did. Now, we've heard all the concerns from parents about screen time and, the dangers of the internet. And, a lot of this is emerging, but it was really interesting to me that, 3 out of 4 parents, despite all of that, still felt like it was the right idea. I know most everyone may be a parent on this Board of Education. But the reasons why, because a follow-up question to that was, well, what are the reasons your child needs a phone at school? Were largely personal. So again, going back to that emergency and safety concern, that was by far the number one reason, along with logistical planning. So not needing to talk to your child at school, but needing to talk to your child around school. So there's also like a really strong call to action from parents. 82% believe that there should be district-wide policies on cell phones, right? And a little bit over half would support allocating tax dollars or some sort of financial investment into securing the resources required to manage for cell phone management at schools. Even if it meant, and this was a specific thing that we added in there, even if it meant that it would take away, there would be a trade-off or it would take away from something else. So what this signals to me, again, this is not conclusive, but what this signals to me is that parents may be really concerned about the effects of screen time and the effects of phones, but the utility that phones provide for their lifestyle is really, 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 really important. So much so that they are willing to risk it, I suppose, and get the cell phone. At the same time, this also signals that cell phones are a personal choice that we make for our families, right? And but we really want the school to kind of manage this for us while the kids are at schools. And that's understandable. There's no judgment there. But I think for me, this was an important moment to understand truly the role that I play as a parent in the challenge that schools are having around cell phones. And the amount of time and effort that this board and the principals and everyone is taking to just manage something that I want for my child at school. So really important note for parents here. So what are parents willing to do, right? We're willing to, we want the district to act. We're willing to invest financially in some sort of solution. We asked in the survey what sort of actions parents would be willing to take. And so modeling and encouraging responsible phone use by helping their child prioritize school work over phones was one of the things that parents said they were most willing to do. Review the school's cell phone policy with their child and establish clear expectations for phone use at school. And then support school enforcement of the policy. So if a teacher enacts the enforcement, then they would support the teacher. The things that parents were least willing to do were join a community that educates parents on the impacts of technology and internet access, such as Wait Until 8 or Mama, which is basically just educating yourself on what is going on with kids on the internet or with smartphones. Delaying giving their kid independent access to a smartphone or a personal connected device. And then the one that parents were least willing to do, and this one kind of blew me away, but I feel like we all just need to hear this together, right? Is that parents were least willing to be accountable for their child's cell phone access during school hours by using parental control apps. So honestly, if every parent who got their kid a cell phone did this, the job of managing cell phones at school would be significantly less complex than it is today. And I think that that was just kind of like, that blew me away. One other note to make here, and then I'm gonna pass this off to John for the other part of the presentation, is that parents were also really willing to call, like one of the things that came up is like, why can't parents just call the office if they need to get in touch with their students? Parents are actually, this one showed up right in between these two groups. They're willing to do that, but they also felt that either they didn't have high confidence that the office would be able to manage the volume of those requests, or they specifically said that they had done that before and that they weren't really met with like friendliness, or it didn't seem like that was encouraged by the group. So I wanted to just call that out, that is something that parents are also willing to do, but might be something that needs to be considered. So ultimately what this means is that really parents, we have decided to give our kids these phones. We have decided they're very important to us. We want the school to make changes to manage these phones at schools. And we're willing to provide to kind of provide passive support where the school decides what to do and then we just kind of support them. But we're less willing to, parents, take a more active role in the actual management of our children's smartphones or phones in general. And I think this is a really big opportunity for the school to include parents as a stakeholder in the policy and specifically talk about what actions parents need to take in order to make the policy successful. And with that, I will.
Yes, that's a lot, that's
Thank you.
a lot to digest on the cell phone front. That was only one of the things that we did. There's obviously a lot of information out there, and I think, you know, I don't say just personal feelings on the matter, and we were really trying our best to kind of hash all that out, which I think Christina did a beautiful job kind of conveying kind of the task that was before us. Then it leads us to AI. An interesting thing with this is this isn't, I don't want to say it's clear cut, but I think it was more so when we had our training, we had the same training that you guys, I believe, had with Matt Burvis. And I believe he mentioned it as it being like this moving target, and the world is changing with AI. So our approach to kind of navigating the AI discussion in our group was more so, how do we want to move, or what might be the way of moving forward as a district around it? The biggest trend that came through was there is a demand for policies and training because there's an opportunity to strengthen the skills. I think that there was not necessarily clear-cut evidence that suggests we shouldn't allow our kids to use AI, period. And I think there was an overwhelming amount of data that, again, suggests we should really be helping our students to improve in terms of navigating this area. So this is just kind of snippets from the report that suggest that we don't really have policies in place. So maybe we need some type of targeted guidelines or recommendations, whether or not that's policy per se, about how to navigate AI within our schools. In terms of other just pieces that are related to this, in all of the survey questions related to AI, what I found interesting was, and I've seen it firsthand anecdotally, is that students just aren't equipped with the skills to navigate a lot of this. That doesn't mean that they can't. It's just, I think that there hasn't been explicit instruction on how to navigate it. And that's one thing that came up over and over again in the survey data that we had and in our conversations as a group. Educators show higher acceptance of AI use for certain applications, time management, brainstorming, study aids. I know firsthand students that have had conversations have used it as, you know, not necessarily a peer tutor, but a way to get feedback in their writing. So there are educationally beneficial approaches to using AI. I think the big worry that came through in a lot of our conversations in the report was about assessments and using AI in ways that might violate, you know, academic integrity policies. And are you submitting work that is not really an original thought and is something that a robot made? So we had a lot of conversations about that. In terms of kind of going forward from here, and this kind of highlights the same idea, where students, interestingly enough, reported that they are super confident in AI skills, and educators reported that no, they are not. And then there's just kind of some anecdotal quotes there. And I think, again, it highlights this idea that we just could be doing a better job. I think in terms of either having a targeted approach to tackling AI skills and general tech skills, which I'll also get into, but that it is also, as that last quote says there, AI is part of our future. It's our present and our future. We mentioned in the report that we would not have been able to really do as much as we did without relying extensively through Christina's expertise on how to utilize AI to navigate a lot of that stuff, which for me was very, like, I wouldn't say eye-opening, but I really appreciate how you could use it as a tool. And I know we've talked about when maybe I was here back in February, how the internet was a tool, the calculator is a tool. There are other things that can be used for educationally appropriate, you know, tasks. I think the big thing that is worrisome is, well, what if my task isn't AI proof? And I think that is a different conversation, not so much a conversation around, you know, AI policies per se. Leading academic institutions, I know that our international baccalaureate program, they have their own guidelines, which I'll get into, and there are other institutions that are coming out, which is also in the report with links to different places of guideline frameworks for what a suggested AI policy should look like. And then there's also pending state legislation on this topic as well about kind of tackling AI on two fronts. What is an appropriate tool that maybe schools could be using that might be safe for student use? And then what might be some regulatory frameworks behind that tool? So just like the cell phones, maybe not so much on the forefront, but there might be something that might come down the road later on about having some type of guidelines that schools need to implement around, AI safety, just like we would have for internet safety. As I mentioned, these are kind of just links that are in the report about different institutions that are, or bodies that are recommending how and where responsible AI use would be or could be utilized. So feel free in the report, if you haven't, to take a look at a lot of those. I just highlight the IB one as a teacher of one of our IB courses. Reading this kind of as I kind of began my own journey with IB, I've kind of changed my tune in a way, and I've relied and used AI a lot in my own teaching this year. And I've tried to, throughout this whole process, realize how I could even shift my own teaching in the classroom to teach these skills and to teach kind of when it is appropriate, how could you use it? Because I think when students see it as much more than it can just do the work for you, it becomes a much powerful tool for them to enhance their own understanding and learning. So that is kind of the piece around AI. I know that that's maybe not as definitive on the cell phone front, but I think it just speaks to the fact that there really isn't a quote unquote best course of action as it relates to AI. We still don't know what things might look like in 2, 3, 4 years. But I think what we can start thinking about, as the report mentions, is putting together some type of guidelines or framework around AI and our approach as a district for teaching these skills. So this kind of leads to the second part of this, which I had alluded to earlier, that Christine and I think are most excited about, was recognizing that there's really this opportunity for our tech skills to improve. I think with a lot of individuals and students being quote unquote tech native, where they have grown up with tech their whole life, that there's this understanding that, oh, you've had it, so you know how to use it. Students are very good at using the tech for the reasons they want to use the tech for, like navigating social media and things like that. But 0% of educators feel that students don't really meet expectations on any of the tech skills that we feel will be necessary or kids should have by the time they graduate. 70% of those that were surveyed, the questions related to tech skills, say that students also are learning, or the students say that they're learning their skills actually outside of Guilford Public Schools, either through their own interests and things that they are navigating themselves. And this really kind of sheds light on maybe there again is an opportunity for improvement. And one of the questions that was asked in the survey is, well, how would you in your own way like to see tech be taught? Is it something that should be a standalone like course sequence where kids are actually taking tech specific courses? Or is it something that should be kind of embedded as part of and through the entire curriculum across all schools? And what kind of showed up was like, well, maybe it should kind of be both, right? We should have some tech courses that can hit on some of these skills, as well as embedding certain technology standards, if you will, all the way through, so that kids by the time they're in high school can master and navigate things and see again something like AI as being a tool. So we kind of went through. Caitlin Lombardi, who's the technology integration specialist, was really the one that led the charge on this, in terms of trying to look at a scope and sequence of tech skills in general, starting all the way beginning of kindergarten all the way through graduation, and layering in different skills and standards that kids should be maybe mastering or being introduced to at that time. So it would be age appropriate, but it would also build on it. So it wouldn't be something like you're not going to hear the word AI until you're in 9th grade, but you might be introduced to some of the basics of it maybe as early as 3rd or 4th grade. So you can start to recognize what is something that is good that AI has produced, and what is something that we know is just garbage. So this is the other part of that that's tied in, is that the majority of educators are not clear on what their school strategy is for this kind of targeted approach, which again just calls more attention, or brings more attention to the fact that like there is this opportunity to strengthen this area, or they believe that their school doesn't have a specific strategy at all. So when you look at, and then these figures were also in the report, right? 40% mentioned that they're not sure what it is, 27% there said there is really no strategy. 21% said that it was kind of holistic integration by teachers, a balance, and then a structured, defined approach for every grade level. So as a group in the report, I believe the link is in there as well to this document that we kind of put together as like a suggested framework. It doesn't have to be what we as a district adopt, but it is a path forward in terms of how we could.
There's a ton of
Yeah.
quotes in here that talk from an educator perspective, parent and guardian perspective, and student perspectives about this topic and about wanting more intention
Yeah.
around the strategy for teaching tech skills. And then I'll just jump to this.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So, yeah.
And I think a lot of that just as we were going through kind of the survey data and kind of putting the report together, I think the communication on the tech front, I think is huge too. With what is the purpose and the rationale for the tech that we are using? It's not just technology for the sake of technology, as long as it makes sense to use technology and there is a rationale for it. That was something that was a huge concern, I think, of parents particularly was, well, what is the tech being used for? We're just using tech for the sake of it. So our approach in this document that we kind of put together, we basically link that back to the portrait of the graduate as kind of an anchoring point. How can we, embed all of the different aspects of the portrait of the graduate into this document so that we are teaching kids how to be effective communicators and thinkers and things of that nature. It considers community survey feedback about technology skills and when they should be introduced. As I mentioned, maybe introducing certain things at a young age, but waiting for some of those maybe higher level skills until they're older. It has been reviewed by different people, not only on our committee, but members of our community were kind of charged and asked them like, hey, would you mind consulting with members of your team at your particular building, just get some insight and some feedback on this. Are we missing anything? Because I think a big piece for the educator side of this is educators already have a lot on their plate. And I think one big thing for them is just like with cell phones, is this going to be one more thing that I'm going to have to manage? And I think when we were working as a group, and Caitlin was, Lombardi was great about this, is we can kind of work this document or this model or this framework in such a way that we can mold it to what we're already doing, as opposed to needing to reinvent the wheel and come up with entirely new curricula for how we're going to do this, like in third grade, let's say. And then it does include approaches for AI skill development, as I mentioned. So in summary, cell phones take time away from learning, and current policies show room for improvement or reform across the board. There is no true perfect solution that exists to meet all the needs for all the stakeholder groups. As Christina mentioned, the big thing is consistency. So whatever happens going forward, I think that not only from your guys' position, but at the building level as well, right down to the classroom, is huge. Consistency, and as educators, we can sometimes be our own worst enemy, where we think we might be doing something that good, but it might cut against, what we're trying to do in the collective. In terms of whatever approach is rolled out, a phased, transparent, coordinated rollout with shared responsibility. As Christina mentioned, I think this is something that was mentioned multiple times in the report about, while this is something that's impacting our schools, it can't just be on teachers, it can't just be on administrators. I think there is a huge opportunity for the community and parents and teachers and administrators to work together, because ultimately we want the best outcomes for our students. In terms of the AI front, as I mentioned, there's a strong demand for policies, guidance, training, both for teachers and for students. I think there's a huge opportunity for growth there. Not necessarily an outright ban, because again, we want to better prepare students for life after different public schools, with greater training and emphasis on skill development and appropriate use. And lastly, the collective community shows a strong demand for reevaluating our tech integration strategy and a much more coordinated effort for building technology skill sets. Thank you.
Really tremendous. Thank you. I'm imagining we may have some questions, but I also am thinking that I'd like to do public comment. There are people I think that are here maybe for public comment and rather have them wait longer. And then if we have any questions, if you don't mind, kind of, I do want then to move to an opportunity for public comments on the technology committee presentation, if anyone is here to do that. We just ask that you come up to the podium, state your name and address. Generally keep it in to 3 minutes if you can.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Doug Meacham. My address is 19 Old Quarry Road in Guilford. I'm a professor at Yale Law School where I teach and write about legal regulation of parent-child relationships. And I also hold a secondary appointment at the Yale Child Study Center. I'm a parent of an A.W. Cox student, so a young student, but have been very worried about this issue. And so first, I'd just like to thank the Board of Education for addressing it, and also thank the committee for producing what was a masterful presentation. I find it impossible to have taken in such a long and really dense and informative presentation without offering at least a couple reflections on that. It was not surprising, I guess, to see that the regulated groups, the students, had the least appetite for regulation. I think you see that everywhere in law. So I don't think we need to sort of balance the desires of the groups equally on that. I also think while parents, yes, are giving cell phones to their kids, parents, we face a collective action problem. And so it's really the solution to the collective action problem is a clear policy or rule. And it was interesting to hear the data about emergency situations, which I think, just to echo the sentiment, that it'd be helpful to communicate that to parents. It seems like not a wise strategy to legislate on the possibility of something without concrete evidence that actually it's serving the purpose of helping students and parents in emergencies. And so I think it's also useful to add that to the mix. Obviously, after watching that, I mean, I was coming to speak some about the research that exists because I've been interested in this, but it was so clear that the research just points in one direction, which is that the cell phones in schools don't support, but actually undermine student learning and child development. Research shows that even the presence of cell phones, that is, even if they're not being used, are distracting students. And research also shows that children, when they have cell phones in schools, experience a less supportive learning environment. And it seems that the studies that exist, while not a lot at this point, show that students have greater academic achievement and report less bullying in a better environment when they're not accessing their cell phones. And I also just wanted to comment on the fact that cell phones provide endless access to students to social media, and we have increasing amounts of disturbing research about the effects of social media on students, including the harms to their attentional capacity. And I think that should be one of the most important things that we're thinking about. Attention is a vital skill for success in a range of settings. And today it's an increasingly short supply. And especially at a critical stage of brain development, children should be exposed to less social media and fewer demands on their attention that takes them away from their schoolwork. I also just wanted to note the effects of this are not evenly distributed across the student population. So take, for example, research suggesting that brain development in children who struggle with emotional regulation and impulse control may be more adversely affected, or research showing that girls have higher rates of anxiety and depression related to social media use than boys. And it's great that there's something that can be done about this and that the Board of Education is considering a district-wide policy. It seems that that sort of clear and comprehensive approach is the best way to proceed. Teacher by teacher policies don't seem to be the answer. As a teacher, I know how difficult it is to have and enforce policies and practices that diverge from other instructors, especially in ways that appear more restrictive than your colleagues. And restrictions that fall short of locked pouches seem to place unreasonable enforcement demands on teachers. And I was struck in the data that was presented that classroom teachers were the ones most asking for more restrictive and clear and comprehensive policies. And as a parent, I want to support my child's development by limiting their personal cell phone use during school. This is especially important for parents like me who have children who experience attention deficit issues. And so given the collective action problem of parents face, it seems important that the school district be setting a policy here. So I simply want to urge the Board of Education to follow what seems to be a growing trend to adopt a policy that's requiring students to put their cell phones in locked pouches. Thank you again for allowing me to have the time and for taking all the time to do this amazing committee.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to?
Very short. I'm Karen Goldberg, 566 White Birch Drive. I have 3 children that have graduated from the Guilford school system. And I am a pediatrician in Madison and in Guilford. Madison and in Clinton, I'm sorry. I have been in practice for over 20 years. And as all of you guys know, there has just been an explosion over the last 10 years of depression, ADHD, anxiety, and loneliness in all age groups. I see it every single day. And I feel like we all agree that cell phones are probably a major component in this. I therefore am imploring the Board of Ed to take all of these, suggestions to heart. And I hope that there will be a ban on cell phone use in the schools. In my practice, I frequently speak with parents and teachers who are concerned about the addictive nature of smartphones and the toll they take on our students' ability to concentrate. The presence of cell phones in classrooms encourages multitasking, which studies have repeatedly shown reduces the quality of learning. Additionally, there is mounting evidence that the constant use of cell phones contributes to the rising rate of ADHD diagnoses, especially among students who are already struggling with executive function and impulse control. Instead of helping these students succeed, phones often deepen their challenges and create further barriers to learning. I feel terrible for the students who have to battle this every day. Another major concern is the effect of cell phones on children's social lives. I see more and more children and teens reporting feeling lonely despite being digitally connected throughout the day. This paradox stems from the fact that the screen-based interaction is replacing face-to-face communication. Instead of forming meaningful friendships during lunch and recess, students are often buried in their phones, isolating themselves and missing opportunities to build essential interpersonal skills. For many children, this disconnection contributes to a cycle of social anxiety, exclusion, and loneliness that can have long-term outcomes. There's also a concerning link between increasing screen time and reduced physical activity, which contributes to the rise of childhood obesity and related health conditions. When students are glued to their devices during breaks, instead of engaging in physical play or in-person interaction, their overall well-being suffers. Schools have a responsibility to promote healthy habits, and restricting cell phone use can help reinforce boundaries that encourage movement, social bonding, and real-world engagement. Ultimately, banning cell phones during the school day is not a punishment. It is a step towards raising healthier, more focused, and emotionally connected children. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Real quick, I'm David Stillman, 57 Cindy Lane. Full disclosure, I'm married to Caitlin Lewis. Children's school system. I really appreciate everything the committee has done and Board of Ed for taking us on. We love this school system very much. I'm a pediatric surgeon at Yale Children's Hospital. I care very much about the safety of children as we deal with pediatric trauma, et cetera. We looked through all this literature together. And we tried to keep out the editorials, tried to keep out the things that weren't peer reviewed. My personal relationship with phones is I love my phone. I'm distracted by games, emails, and I'm not nearly as popular as a high school student. I get 100 emails a day and 20 texts a day. And I find that if I'm on an airplane with my phone locked up, 6 hours of work can be accomplished in about 45 minutes. And when I see people out on dates and they're on their phones, I know that it's the worst date. And so I hope that you guys see this as an opportunity, that if we said we had new math that could turn your C students into B students or your B students into honor students, that you'd be jumping all over that new math. And so I hope that you see this as an opportunity to improve the focus of students, improve the function of students, and to define the culture of the Guilford school system. That, lunch could be the equivalent of a good date. Bad date. I gotta run to the babysitter. So.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to?
If I could add a few minutes,
Yeah.
I know everybody's time is limited, so. All right, hi everyone, I'm Armand Fisharaki, I'm a cognitive neurologist at Yale, and I feel like Yale is very well represented today. I don't have a formal presentation to offer here, but I just want to share a few thoughts. I see brain injury patients and I see patients with dementia, so my vantage point might be somewhat unique here, but I'm also a parent of a 6.5-year-old and 8-year-old girl. And I've seen what social media has done to kids' developments. I really deeply believe from a philosophical point of view, time and attention are our most precious resources. So our times are finite, everybody's time is finite. So attention becomes that very, very precious resource that we all have. And I've seen the data, the complaint data that Kevin presented earlier. It shows that what phones do to our attention, what social media does to our attention also. And I'm deeply disturbed by the data. As a parent, as a clinical neuroscientist, also from that vantage point. So these discussions are difficult. I fully appreciate that also. I also appreciate Christina presenting both the student sides of the coin, but also the teachers, educators side of the coin. So I think moving forward, I think discussion needs to take place. Restrictive policy, even though they're difficult, I think the data speaks for itself. The kind of the cognitive advantage of slightly more restrictive policy might go a long way. And if I feel like if the parents have access to that data, their ambivalence towards these policies might change. So if they realize that it could mean difference of 1 full grade by being fully attended during school time and having slightly less access during the school hours, but afterward they can't have full access. So I think those adjustments can be made if the bigger picture is kept in mind. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Polly Reeder, 280 Sage Hollow Road. Thank you. Thank you. Really, thank you, Caitlin. And so I commend the quality of the survey and for its gathering opinions and personal experiences and just masses of information. But I agree, I mean, the key here is communicating the actual information, the real research out to the parents. Some of that could have possibly been within the survey, but I think wanting to perhaps keep it neutral or whatnot. I think the research is on the smartphone use is quite clear. And for a policy for our students' best interests, for their mental health, their social and emotional development, their neurological development of their brain still developing, their learning, as well as for our teachers, for their teaching and their job satisfaction. We know that the cell phones are uniquely addictive. They're designed to be so. They negatively affect the adolescents, the brains, the reward system, the attention span, self-regulation, the increasing anxiety, a more negative self-image, social isolation, reducing belonging, which is what we're supposed to be all about increasing here and working on at Guilford. And we're talking about 14-year-olds here. So why not continue with what's working at Baldwin and Adams? I mean, this is not rocket science, right? It's not. One board member has said, well, they'll have them at college, they'll have them at work. They should learn to manage these things. But our chair has said, and others have pointed out in the past that, this exact same thing applies to alcohol. And we don't freely provide that to teenagers. So, I mean, there's just all this research. Teachers have had this burden way too long. And we clearly should not have open access to the phones between classes, which has sadly been reduced to only 4 minutes to get across this high school between classes. That doesn't make sense. And students would instead freely interact with live peers. They would actually maybe look people in the eyes and not a device. The science is clear and that the phone should not even be in the room. So we heard so much more really fantastic things today, and I hope people really listen quite closely to the Zoom. These, of course, are very quick reads, and there's the whole other aspect of play, which has been talked about time and again. It's key. But I just want to, you know, from Jonathan Hyde's work and whatnot, and I would be curious, I would think that probably the advisory committee has not even come across one district that have said that they wanted to go back from making the change. Cost should not be an issue. Amazingly, in the survey results, you know, it's said that it shouldn't hinder us. It shouldn't provide an excuse for not setting a healthy, appropriate policy. And we've seen time and again, this community stepping right up with generous donations, athletics, music, Baldwin Playground, anything, you name it, you know, these student enrichment experiences. So I just want to quickly, I want to close by saying, I think it's also really important to keep in mind, this board has an opportunity now, as was being said, to address this and to fix this. We're already working against 3 continued choices. These things can be changed that heavily impact our students, mostly not in a good way. The district is quite complicit in increasing the screen time of our children. As has been said again, we drop, you know, surprise, Chromebook is dropped into your house 24/7. The kid is still in elementary, they're as young as 10, and there is little true support or advocacy from the district on reasonable use guidelines and software.
Well, I'm just going to ask you to wrap it up here too, because we're at.
Second, we all know about the unhealthy start time, which should have been fixed 7 years ago. That board botched the opportunity. So please don't botch this one. Thirdly, that's made even worse by the school buses arriving still on the old schedule, almost a half hour even earlier before school starts, which is rather disingenuous. I think, you know, they just hope not every parent realizes it's all doing that. And I just want to say, so in the last several years, this board, this chair, you guys have really shown your fortitude in terms of standing up for equity, for student wellness. So I do feel like, you know, you have what it takes to do that and to get the information out there and the increased transparency we have with the administration to educate our parents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to? We'll make sure we give everyone time. All right. Do any of my colleagues have questions for the committee now? Not now. All right. I read the report. I feel like now I want to dive back in after hearing your presentation. I do hope you don't mind as we dive into this. I'm not going to pretend to know the time it might take us to absorb this, think about it, discuss it. But it's certainly not going to be in the next 2 months, right? I mean, I think we're going to want some time with this, but I hope you don't mind if we come back to the committee if need be. I mean, we have representatives here, but we may find ourselves wanting to avail ourselves of what you've been through, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Do you have anything you'd like to say? I want to give you an opportunity before.
I again just want to add my thanks. I mean, this was a terrific conversation tonight, terrific presentation, and it's just representative of the time and effort and thought that you all put into this conversation. We are thrilled that we invited a representative group to begin this conversation and pass it off to this Board of Education. And I just want to appreciate all of you, and particularly the students who sat at that table and made sure their voice was heard with this really impressive group. So thank you all, and particularly thank the 2 of you for being part of this conversation.
I do also want to note that the board, we received, I want to say 5 or 6 emails over the last probably 3 or 4 days from folks commenting on this. Some parents, some neurologists or school counselors, clinical psychologists, a teacher, and then folks who are often a combination, right, of those, as I know a number of the committee members are. Really helpful to hear from people in a detailed way, what they think is important. And for folks who are watching this over live stream, welcome input as you dive into the report. I believe we'll be making this report available online.
Yeah, we'll be sharing the report, the slide presentation, and this video. So the recording of this meeting will be archived on our YouTube channel, and both your paper report, your executive summary, and the slide presentation will all be available on this district website in the board tab underneath outside objective reports, I believe.
Sure.
So with a lot of other important information from really impressive groups that we've commissioned over the years. And so again, thank you. It's the first step in all the thoughtful comments about transparency.
And then I do, I have at least one last question. I know as I read it, I have some notes here, a couple of questions that I don't need answered right this second, but would you be open to getting an email from any of us as board members if we just have clarification questions about something written in the report?
Absolutely.
Sure, Ben.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. This has been terrific. This is the end of this portion of the meeting. We do, as a board, have an executive session we need to go into for the purposes of starting the superintendent evaluation, which we do every year. I again want to thank so much the committee. I especially want to thank both of you for not only leading the committee, but giving us a presentation tonight. When we come back from executive session, we're not going to be having any more discussion or voting. So folks can feel comfortable to leave and not feel like they're going to miss anything. I am going to ask then for a motion to go into executive session, please.
Could I ask that include an invitation for me?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That's really important. I forget what to do that now. We are going to be bringing Dr. Freeman into the executive session as the topic of the executive session is the start of the evaluation. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.